These goddamn cocky bastards called Earth a dirt planet until humanity revealed the armada they spent decades building right under the aliens' noses. Sir, we've intercepted another transmission from the Ulians. You need to hear this one, Lewis Morgan's intelligence officer reported, his voice shaking slightly. Louis narrowed his eyes and played the message. The sneering, slimy voice of Ulian Overlord Bellows filled the command center. The humans are nothing but primitive apes crawling in the mud of their dirt planet. They aren't even worth the effort to conquer. Leave that ball of filth alone. We have far greater priorities. Rage surged through Lewis's veins. He slammed his fist on the console. How dare these arrogant alien pricks disparage and dismiss humanity like this? After all the sweat, sacrifice, and ingenuity that had gone into building Earth's secret fleet over the last 30 years just for this moment? Oh, he'd show them humanity's true strength, all right. Sir, don't do anything rash, his second-in-command cautioned. Earth Force Command's orders were clear. Avoid provoking the Ulians at all costs. Their tech is still centuries ahead of ours. Louis ground his teeth but nodded curtly. He knew they were right, damn it. The armada was fearsome but no match for the Ulians. Yet. For now, he had to bide his time. But then espionage reports started coming in. The Ulians were preparing to annex a dozen resource-rich worlds in Earth's stellar neighborhood and establish heavily fortified military outposts. If they succeeded, they'd hem humanity in, cut off its room to expand, and keep Earth as a pathetic backwater. Lewis clenched his jaw with steely resolve. To hell with orders. He couldn't let that happen. He'd defy Earth Force Command and gather the full might of the secret fleet. The most devastating warships, the most lethal weapons, the most elite troops, all trained relentlessly for this very day. He'd intercept the Ulian invasion forces and hit them with all humanity's pent-up fury and the shock of the Armada's existence. The sheer surprise combined with mankind's legendary determination might just be enough to pull off a miracle victory against the odds. But as Louis watched the Armada assemble, he knew what he was risking. His career, his life, Earth's safety if this gambit failed. All on this one roll of the dice to defend mankind's pride and future as a star-faring power. This was it, humanity's single fleeting chance to prove itself to a hostile universe that thought it was just a dirt species. Lewis swore he'd make it count, no matter what it cost him. Lewis gaped at the incoming message from Earth Command. Shit, they had found out about his plan. Commodore Morgan, your orders are to stand down immediately. Engaging the Ulians could lead to a devastating war we aren't prepared for. Return to base at once. The stern voice of Admiral Graves crackled through the comms. Lewis pounded his fist against the console, gritting his teeth. His officers looked at him uneasily, the tension thick in the command deck. Sir, maybe we should follow orders. His second-in-command ventured hesitantly. No. If we back down now, it will only embolden those Ulian bastards. They'll think humanity is weak and ripe for conquest. I won't let that happen. Lewis's voice was hard as steel. He turned to face his officers, his eyes blazing. This is our chance to show the Ulians what mankind is made of, that we won't just roll over for them. Yes, this is a risk, but the risk of doing nothing is even greater. I won't condemn humanity to living as second-class citizens because we lacked the courage to act. The officers looked at each other and then back at Louis. One by one, they nodded, a glint of persistence entering their eyes. We're with you, sir. To the end, declared his weapons officer firmly. All right, let's do this. For Earth. Louis thrust his fist forward. His crew echoed the cheer. As they neared the Ulian-occupied worlds, Lewis's heart pounded. This was it. The moment of truth. The sensor officer suddenly called out. Sir, detecting multiple Ulian warships in defensive formation around the planets. Their numbers are far greater than expected. Lewis paled as he studied the tactical display. The Ulian ships, dripping with weapons, heavily outnumbered his own forces. The odds were not in their favor. For a moment, doubt crept into his heart. No, he couldn't falter now. His people were counting on him. Lewis forced his mind into overdrive, rapidly adjusting his battle plan. "Comm officer, open a channel to the Ullian flagship. It's time we let them know the score." As the comm link engaged, Louis drew himself up and spoke in a voice of cold authority. "This is Commodore Lewis Morgan of the Earth Battle Fleet. Your occupation of these worlds is illegal and a direct act of aggression against the Terran Alliance. We demand you immediately withdraw your forces from this system." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then cruel laughter came over the channel. "Is this some kind of joke?" sneered a slimy voice. The scarred visage of Ullian Overlord Belos appeared on screen, his expression of shock quickly turning to amusement. "Since when does Earth have a battle fleet?" "Since now. I suggest you take a closer look at your scans," Louis replied icily. He watched with satisfaction as Belos's eyes widened upon seeing the impressive human armada arrayed against him. "Impossible," Belos sputtered, but then his face contorted with rage. "No matter. You humans are still no match for us. I'll enjoy crushing you like the insects you are, and claiming your worlds as my prize." The Ullian ships surged forward, weapons charging. Louis stood unflinching on the bridge. There was no turning back now. He opened the fleet-wide comm. "All ships, engage the enemy. Concentrate fire on their command vessels. Let's show these alien bastards the fury of Earth." With a roar of engines, the human fleet leapt into battle. Louis felt a surge of pride at the skill and ferocity of his people as they met the Ullians head-on. Terran ships danced nimbly around the lumbering enemy dreadnoughts, pummeling them with volleys of missiles and directed energy beams. The new experimental weapons tore through the Ullian shields smoothly. Louis gripped the arms of his command chair as his ship shuddered from a hit. Damage reports scrolled across his display, but he barely glanced at them. His eyes were locked on the unfolding battle, his mind racing as he analyzed and adapted to the Ullians' tactics. Despite the fury of the human assault, the Ullians' superior numbers began to tell. One by one, human ships winked out on the tactical display as they fell to the unrelenting enemy barrage. Lewis's heart clenched as he saw the life signs of his crewmates fading. The bridge shook violently, sparks flying from shattered consoles. "Hull breach on decks 5 through 9. We're losing atmosphere," an officer cried out, terror in his voice. Louis stared grimly at the tactical display, the flickering holograms casting an eerie glow over his face. More than half his fleet had been destroyed. Those remaining were heavily damaged, barely holding formation. The Ullians, sensing victory, pressed their assault with renewed savagery. In that moment, a memory surfaced, clear and sharp. His history teacher's voice, describing the ancient battle of Thermopylae on Earth, where 300 Spartans had held off the might of the Persian Empire. They had known they faced certain death, and yet they had fought anyway, buying precious time for their people to rally. Perhaps, Lewis thought, humanity was fated to be the Spartans of the galaxy, dying to hold the line against the forces that would enslave them. If this was to be his end, he would make it a worthy one. "Sir, the Ullians are regrouping. They're preparing for a final attack run." The voice of his sensor officer yanked Louis back to the present. He took a deep breath, feeling a sudden clarity come over him. If his people were to have any chance of surviving, he had to act now. "Come, get me Soren, Martinez, and Chandra," he ordered, naming his 3 best pilots. When their faces appeared on the screen, begrimed but determined, he spoke quickly. "Listen up. I need you to take your squadrons and punch through the Ullian lines. Head straight for Belos's command ship and hit it with everything you've got. We'll keep the rest of their fleet occupied." The pilots glanced at each other. They knew it was a suicide mission, but each of them straightened and saluted crisply. "Aye, aye, sir, we won't let you down." Louis watched as the 3 squadrons of fighter craft, the pride of the fleet, peeled away and streaked towards the Ullian formation. The enemy ships unleashed a blistering hail of firepower, trying to swat the human gnats. But Soren, Martinez, and Chandra flew like demons, twisting and dodging through the deadly storm, drawing ever closer to their target. Sir, the Ulian command ship is launching fighters to intercept our attack run. Damn it! All reserve power to forward guns. Concentrate fire on those fighters. We have to give our people a chance, Louis barked. The bridge crew responded instantly, hands flying over their consoles. The ship's weapons glowed red-hot as they rapid-fired into the oncoming Ulian fighters, tearing them to shreds. But there were so many. Louis watched the tactical display, his heart in his throat, as the three blips representing his pilots wove through the swarming enemy fighter craft. They were so close to Belos's ship. If they could just... A cheer went up as Soren's voice crackled over the comm. Missile lock acquired! Firing! A heartbeat later, the Ulian command ship was engulfed in a blinding fireball as the human antimatter warhead struck home. Secondary explosions ripped through its hull as it listed drunkenly, belching smoke and debris. But the cheers turned to cries of dismay as the sensors showed Soren, Martinez, and Chandra's craft, winking out one by one, overwhelmed by the Ulian fighters. They had given their lives to strike that critical blow. Louis bowed his head for a moment, but there was no time to grieve. He had to press the attack now, while the Ulians were reeling. All ships, this is Commodore Morgan. The Ulian command has been crippled. Form up on me and prepare for a final assault. We will not let our comrades' sacrifice be in vain. For Earth. The ragged remains of the human fleet surged forward like an avenging tide, Louis' ship at the tip of the spear. The Ulian battleships, momentarily thrown into disarray by the loss of their flagship, struggled to reform their lines. Ulian ships are charging weapons. Incoming missiles! Louis didn't flinch as his ship shuddered under the impact of enemy fire, consoles exploding around him. They were in knife fight range now, prow to prow with the Ulian capital ships. He could see the fear in the eyes of the enemy bridge crews as the battered but unbroken human ships bore down on them. All guns, fire at will. The Terran fleet unleashed the totality of its anger in a storm of fire. Beams of superheated plasma and magnetically accelerated projectiles ripped into the Ulian hulls, breaching their reactors. One by one, the mighty alien warships shuddered and went dark. The cries of their crews abruptly silenced as they died in the cold of space. And then, suddenly, it was over. The remaining Ulian ships, their fighting spirit broken, turned and fled, limping back to their home space. A ragged cheer went up from the human crews as they saw the enemy retreating. They had done it. In a seemingly impossible way, they had won. The Terran fleet limped back to Earth, battered but victorious. As they approached the blue marble, cheers erupted across every ship's comm channel. They had done the impossible. Humanity had stood up to the Ulians and won. Louis stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Earth grow larger in the view screen. His uniform was torn and stained with blood, his face bruised and weary, but a fierce pride burned in his eyes. Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from UN headquarters, his comms officer reported. Louis braced himself. He had disobeyed direct orders and risked everything on this gambit. Now it was time to face the consequences. Put it through, he said grimly. To his shock, instead of a court-martial, he was greeted by thunderous applause. The grim faces of the UN Security Council had been replaced by beaming smiles. Commodore Morgan, or should I say Admiral Morgan, the Secretary General announced, your bold actions have saved Earth from Ulian aggression. We salute you. Louis blinked in disbelief as the promotion was made official. The fleet that had been his closely guarded secret was now being openly celebrated. But even as humanity rejoiced, dark clouds were gathering. Intelligence reports flooded in, painting a grim picture. The Ulians were mobilizing on a massive scale, their homeworlds turned into vast war machines churning out ships and weapons. Belos had survived the destruction of his command ship. Now his face was plastered across Ulian propaganda broadcasts, raving about crushing the upstart humans once and for all. Louis threw himself into preparing Earth's defenses. He oversaw the rapid construction of orbital platforms overflowing with weapons. A network of satellites spread through the solar system, creating an early warning grid. He recruited the best minds Earth had to offer, from veteran space pilots to teenage hackers. The fleet grew daily as new ships came online, crewed by eager volunteers ready to defend their homeworld. As Louis pored over tactical displays in his new command center, an aide burst in. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission, but you're not going to believe who it's from." The holographic form of an alien shimmered into view, clearly not Ullian. It called itself Ambassador Talok of the Zephyrians. "Greetings, Admiral Morgan. We have watched your victory over the Ullians with great interest. Perhaps it is time we properly introduce ourselves." Louis's mind raced as he agreed to a secret meeting. Could this be the edge Earth needed? Or was he walking into a trap? The rendezvous point was a nameless asteroid. Louis's shuttle docked with the sleek Zephyrian craft. He stepped aboard, pulse pounding. Talok cut an impressive figure, tall and regal, with iridescent skin. "Welcome, Admiral. We have much to discuss." Over the next hours, Louis learned the truth. The Zephyrians had been secretly aiding Earth's technological development for decades, the advanced weapons that had given his fleet an edge, Zephyrian in origin. "We knew the Ullians would eventually come for Earth," Talok explained, "as they came for us long ago. We wish to give you a fighting chance." Now Talok offered even more advanced technology to bolster Earth's defenses. Ships, weapons, shields beyond anything humans had dreamed of. Louis weighed the offer carefully. The aid could be crucial. But could he trust these aliens? In the end, he agreed to a limited alliance. He would accept their help, but keep Earth's true capabilities close to his chest. The Ullian armada arrived with shocking speed, but Louis was ready. "All ships, execute Plan Theta," he ordered, as enemy vessels poured into the solar system. The orbital defense grid roared to life, catching the Ullians in a crossfire. Mines seeded throughout the asteroid belt detonated, shredding enemy formations. Louis's fleet struck from hidden positions, bloodying the Ullians before vanishing again. The battle raged across the solar system. Louis coordinated the defense from his command ship near Luna, guiding his forces with preternatural calm. Zephyrian squadron hit their left flank. Mars defense group pressed the attack on their center. Human and Zephyrian ships fought side by side, their advanced technology more than a match for Ullian numbers. Still, the weight of the Ullian assault was immense. Scores of Earth ships fell, their crews fighting to the last. Just as the tide seemed to turn in Earth's favor, disaster struck. The Ullians unleashed a new weapon, an energy pulse that somehow targeted neural pathways. Across the human and Zephyrian fleets, crews collapsed in agony. "Status report," Louis barked, fighting through the haze of pain. "Sir, crews incapacitated, ships adrift," his XO gasped out. For a moment, all seemed lost. Then Louis smiled grimly. "Execute Protocol Omega," he ordered. Across the fleet, AIs sprang to life, taking control of the incapacitated ships. Louis had anticipated treachery, though not quite like this. His foresight had saved them. With machine precision, the AI-controlled fleet launched a final, devastating assault on the Ullian flagship. As hull breaches blossomed across the massive vessel, Louis led a strike team to capture Belos. They fought their way through corridors choked with smoke and bodies. On the bridge, Louis came face to face with his nemesis at last. Belos sneered, "So the monkey learns to use tools. No matter, I'll crush you with my bare hands." The alien hurled himself at Louis with inhuman strength. They grappled frantically, crashing into consoles. Louis felt ribs crack under Belos's grip. But years of human martial arts training paid off. Louis slipped free, then caught Belos with a brutal strike to the throat. As the Ullian wheezed, Louis followed up with a flurry of blows that left Belos senseless on the deck. "Belos is down," Louis reported, slapping cuffs on the unconscious alien. "The bridge is ours." The bridge of the Terran flagship was silent as Admiral Louis Morgan stared at the holographic display. Years had passed since their victory over the Ullians, and Earth now stood as a galactic power. But new threats loomed on the horizon. "Sir, We're receiving a priority transmission from Zephyrian High Command, his communications officer reported. Lewis nodded, his face grim. Put it through. The hologram flickered, revealing the iridescent form of Ambassador Taylock. Admiral Morgan, we require Earth's immediate assistance. The Crichtons have set their sights on the Vega system. Lewis's eyebrows furrowed. The Crichtons, a highly advanced militaristic race that had been conquering worlds across the galaxy, and now they threatened Earth's allies. We're aware of the situation, Ambassador. I assure you, we're doing everything we can to... A harsh voice cut through the transmission. This is Supreme Leader Corax of the Crichton Empire. Any interference in our rightful conquest of the Vega system will be met with overwhelming force. Stand down or face annihilation. The transmission cut out, leaving Lewis and his crew in stunned silence. Orders, sir? His XO asked. Lewis ran a hand through his graying hair. Set course for the Vega system. We need to see this situation for ourselves. Days later, Louis stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as the swirling gases of the Vega system came into view. A massive Crichton fleet hung in orbit around the system's outermost planet. Sir, we're detecting energy buildups across the Crichton fleet. They're preparing to attack, his sensor officer called out. Lewis's mind raced. A full-scale war seemed inevitable, unless... Get me a secure line to our top operatives, he ordered. I have a plan. Hours later, Lewis briefed a hand-picked team of Earth's finest soldiers and spies. We're going to use experimental Zephyrian stealth tech to infiltrate the Crichton fleet. Our mission, disable their ships from the inside out. His team exchanged nervous glances but nodded in agreement. Sir, with all due respect, this is insanely risky. Captain Sarah Chen, his second-in-command, spoke up. The UN Security Council will never approve. Louis met her gaze. Then we don't tell them. Sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. Their stealth shuttle slipped past the Crichton defenses undetected. Louis led his team through the alien corridors, planting disruptors on critical systems. 2 more ships and we're home free, Lewis whispered. Suddenly, alarms blared. They'd been discovered. Fall back to the shuttle, Lewis shouted as Crichton soldiers poured into the corridor. They fought their way through the ship, but found their escape route cut off. New plan, Louis growled. We're taking this ship. In a high-stakes endeavor, they fought their way to the bridge, overpowering the Crichton crew. But as they tried to pilot the captured vessel out of the fleet, they found themselves surrounded. This is Supreme Leader Corax. A voice boomed over the comms. You have committed an act of war. Prepare to be destroyed. Lewis watched in horror as the Crichton armada opened fire on the Vega colonies. The Zephyrian defenses crumbled under the onslaught. All Earth forces, this is Admiral Morgan, he broadcast on all frequencies. The Crichtons have launched a full-scale invasion. Engage at will. I repeat, engage at will. The battle that followed was unlike anything Louis had ever experienced. Earth ships clashed with Crichton vessels in a titanic struggle. New weapons, developed in secret, tore through Crichton shields. Lewis's flagship shuddered as it took a direct hit. Crichton boarding parties teleported onto the bridge. He found himself locked in hand-to-hand combat, his years of experience barely keeping him alive. Just when all seemed lost, a Zephyrian battle group dropped out of FTL, catching the Crichtons in a devastating crossfire. Push them back, Louis roared, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. For Earth, for Vega. The tide of battle slowly turned. Crichton ships, their systems crippled by Louis's sabotage, began to fall back. As the last Crichton vessel retreated, Louis slumped in his command chair, exhausted but victorious. Sir, his comms officer called out, eyes wide. We're receiving a transmission from the Crichton ship we captured earlier. It's our infiltration team. They're alive, and they've got Corax. Louis straightened, a mix of relief and shock washing over him. With the Crichton leader as a prisoner, they now held unprecedented leverage, but using it risked further escalation with the already enraged Crichton forces. As the weight of the decision pressed down on him, Louis realized the true test of leadership was yet to come. Admiral Lewis Morgan stood before the captive Crichton leader Corax in the secure holding cell aboard the Earth flagship. The alien's scaly skin glistened under the harsh lights as Lewis approached, flanked by armed guards. "It's time, Corax," Lewis said, his voice steady. "You're going to send a message to your fleet." Corax's reptilian eyes narrowed. "And why would I do that, human?" Louis activated a holographic display, showing the Crichton armada surrounded by Earth and Zephyrian forces. "Because if you don't, your empire ends today." Grudgingly, Corax nodded. Lewis signaled to his communications officer, who set up a secure channel to the Crichton fleet. Corax's gravelly voice filled the room as he spoke. "This is Supreme Leader Corax. I am a prisoner of the humans." His expression resolute, but he continued. "All Crichton forces are to stand down and withdraw from the Vega system immediately." Lewis watched the alien leader carefully, noting the barely contained fury in his eyes. Corax wasn't finished. "Let it be known that this retreat is temporary. Any harm to me will result in the full might of the Crichton Empire raining destruction upon Earth and its pathetic allies." The transmission cut off. Lewis turned to his advisors. "Now we negotiate." Over the next several days, Louis engaged in tense discussions with Crichton representatives. The conference room aboard the flagship buzzed with activity as diplomats from neutral systems observed the proceedings. "We propose a prisoner exchange," Louis stated, his voice firm. "Corax for several of your high-ranking officers. In return, you'll withdraw completely from Vega and the surrounding systems." The Crichton negotiator, a severe-looking female, hissed in disapproval. "Unacceptable. We will not abandon our rightful conquests." Lewis leaned forward, his eyes hard. "You will. And you'll dismantle your forward bases, sign a non-aggression pact with Earth and the Zephyrians, or Corax stays where he is." Hours of heated debate followed. Lewis remained steadfast, knowing the fate of billions hung in the balance. Finally, the Crichtons relented. As Corax was escorted to the shuttle that would return him to his people, he fixed Louis with a cold stare. "This isn't over, human. The Crichton Empire does not forget." Louis watched the shuttle depart, a mix of relief and unease settling in his gut. He turned to his XO. "Keep every sensor we have trained on that Crichton fleet. I want to know the second they so much as twitch." In the weeks that followed, Louis pored over intelligence reports in his ready room. The massive holographic display showed Crichton ships withdrawing from Vega, their military installations going dark one by one. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "we're seeing confirmed decommissioning of Crichton bases in sectors 7 through 12. It appears they're complying with the agreement." Lewis nodded, but his brow remained furrowed. "Double our patrols along the border. Accelerate production of the new Thunderbolt-class destroyers. I want our defenses ironclad." As he issued orders to fortify Earth's positions, a priority alert flashed on his console. Louis activated the message, his eyes widening as he read. "Get me a secure line to Zephyrian High Command," he barked. "Now!" Minutes later, the shimmering form of Ambassador Taylock appeared. "Admiral Morgan," the Zephyrian said, his usual calm demeanor shaken. "I assume you've received the intelligence?" Louis nodded grimly. One of the Crichton prisoners talked. A bioweapon designed to wipe out non-Crichton life forms. "Can you confirm?" Taylock's iridescent skin pulsed with agitation. "We've long suspected the Crichtons of conducting such experiments. This matches our own intelligence. If they succeed, then every non-Crichton world in the galaxy is at risk," Lewis finished. He called up schematics of known Crichton research facilities. "We need to hit them before they can finish this weapon. A covert strike team in and out before they know what hit them." Taylock nodded in agreement. "We'll provide whatever support we can. But Admiral, if this fails—" "It won't," Lewis said firmly, "because failure isn't an option, not with stakes this high." As he began assembling his team for the dangerous mission ahead, Louis couldn't shake the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The fate of countless worlds now rested in his hands. Admiral Lewis Morgan paced the bridge of his flagship, his footsteps echoing in the tense silence. The weight of countless lives pressed down on his shoulders as he awaited news from his strike team. A priority transmission cut through the quiet. Lewis's hand shot out, activating the holographic display. The scarred face of Belos, his former nemesis, flickered into view. "Morgan," Belos growled, his alien features twisted in a sneer. "I have information you need." Louis's heart made. "Speak quickly, Belos. I don't have time for games." Belos's eyes narrowed. "No games, human. I've escaped your pitiful prison, and I have intel on the Crichton bioweapon, but my freedom comes with a price." Lewis listened as Belos laid out his demands. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse, to cut the transmission and hunt down the escaped Olean. But the stakes were too high. "Fine," Louis spat. "We'll meet, but if this is a trick—" Belos's laughter cut him off. "Oh, it's no trick. The Crichtons are a threat to us all. Meet me at these coordinates in 6 hours." The transmission ended, leaving Louis alone with his thoughts. He turned to his XO. "Prepare a security team. We're going on a little trip." 6 hours later, Lewis's shuttle touched down on a desolate asteroid. Armed guards fanned out, securing the perimeter of the decrepit outpost that served as their meeting point. Belos waited inside, flanked by his own followers. The Ulian's eyes gleamed with barely contained hatred as Lewis approached. "Let's get this over with," Louis said, his voice cold. "Show me what you have." Belos produced a data crystal, holding it just out of reach. "First, your guarantee of safe passage and asylum." Louis nodded curtly. "You have my word. Now hand it over." The crystal changed hands. Louis passed it to his science officer, who immediately began analyzing its contents. Minutes stretched into an eternity as Louis waited for confirmation. "Sir?" The officer's voice shook. "It's genuine, and it's worse than we feared." Louis turned back to Belos, his expression grim. "Start talking. Everything you know about this weapon." As Belos spoke, Louis felt the blood drain from his face. A virus engineered to target non-Crichton DNA, causing excruciating death and spreading like wildfire. Billions of lives hung in the balance. "We need to move fast," Louis barked into his communicator. "Get me Captain Keller. We're accelerating the timeline." Within hours, Louis stood in the briefing room of his flagship, facing the grim faces of his strike team. Captain James Keller, a battle-hardened veteran, stepped forward. "Sir, with this new intel, we can pinpoint the exact location of the bioweapon facility, but the security will be immense." Louis nodded. "That's why we're bringing in additional help." The door slid open, revealing Belos and a small group of Oleans. The room erupted in shouts of protest. "Silence," Louis roared. "I don't like it either. But Belos knows Crichton tactics. We need every advantage we can get." Keller's eyes narrowed. "And how do we know we can trust them?" Louis met Belos's gaze. "Because if they betray us, they die with the rest of us. Isn't that right, Belos?" The Ulian's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "For once, human, our goals align. The enemy of my enemy and all that." As the strike team made their final preparations, Louis pulled Keller aside. "Watch them like a hawk. Any sign of betrayal, you take them out. Understood?" Keller nodded grimly. "Yes, sir. We won't fail." Louis watched as the team boarded their stealth shuttle, a motley crew of humans and Ulians united against a common foe. As the bay doors closed behind them, he couldn't shake the feeling that the fate of the stars rested on this unlikely alliance. The shuttle vanished into the void of space, bound for the heart of Crichton territory. Louis returned to the bridge, his mind racing with plans and contingencies. The real battle was just beginning, and he'd be damned if he'd let the Crichtons unleash their genocidal weapon on an unsuspecting galaxy. The stealth shuttle glided silently through the inky void, its advanced Zephyrian cloaking technology rendering it invisible to Crichton sensors. Inside, Captain James Keller gripped the edge of his seat, muscles taut with tension as they approached the heavily fortified Crichton facility. 30 seconds to insertion, the pilot's voice crackled over the comm. Keller turned to face his strike team, a mix of hardened human soldiers and Ullian warriors led by the imposing figure of Belos. Remember the plan. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we don't stop until that bioweapon is neutralized. The shuttle touched down with barely a tremor. As the hatch hissed open, Keller activated his tactical visor, mapping out the facility's layout. Move out! The team split into two groups, each darting off in opposite directions. Keller led his assault team through winding corridors, their footsteps eerily muffled by sound-dampening tech. Rounding a corner, they came face-to-face with a Crichton patrol. Time seemed to slow as both sides registered the other's presence. Keller's rifle snapped up, spitting a burst of plasma that dropped the lead Crichton. His team reacted instantly, filling the air with a storm of fire. The Crichtons fought back ferociously, their scaled hides deflecting glancing blows. Keller dove behind a bulkhead, feeling the heat of enemy fire sizzle past his ear. He tapped his comm. Belos, we need that diversion now. Seconds later, alarms blared throughout the facility. Keller grinned as the Crichton forces hesitated, clearly torn between engaging the immediate threat and responding to the new alert. Taking advantage of the confusion, Keller's team surged forward, their advanced weaponry cutting through Crichton defenses. As they pushed deeper into the facility, Belos's voice crackled over the comm, providing crucial intel on Crichton formations and weak points. Suddenly, a scream of pain erupted from within their own ranks. Keller spun to see one of Belos's Ullians attacking a human soldier, a Crichton blade glinting in its hand. Traitor! Keller roared, his rifle barking. The Ullian dropped, its disguise shimmering away to reveal Crichton features. Tension rippled through the team as human and Ullian alike eyed each other warily. Belos's voice cut through the mistrust. I swear on my life, I knew nothing of this deception. Let me prove our loyalty. I'll take point. Keller nodded grimly, and they pressed on. As they neared the central labs, the resistance intensified. A group of towering Crichton warriors, their bodies rippling with augmented muscle, blocked their path. The firefight that ensued was brutal. Keller watched in horror as his team was cut down one by one, their weapons barely scratching the enhanced Crichtons. Belos proved his worth, using intimate knowledge of Crichton tactics to outmaneuver the behemoths. With a final, desperate push, they breached the lab doors. The sight that greeted them chilled Keller to his core. Rows of bioweapon canisters lined the walls, with Crichton workers hurriedly loading them onto transport ships. Team Alpha, secure those canisters, Keller barked. Beta team with me. We're hitting the main computer core. As they fought their way through the facility, Belos's voice came over the comm once more. Security systems are down. You've got a clear shot at the core. Keller's team surged forward, hope rising in their chests, but their victory was short-lived. Massive blast doors slammed shut around them, emergency lights bathing the corridors in an ominous red glow. Damn it! Keller pounded his fist against the unyielding metal. Belos, what's happening? They've initiated a full lockdown, Belos replied, his voice tight with tension. We're sealed in, and Crichton reinforcements are on their way. Keller's mind raced as he weighed their options. The bioweapon canisters were still in Crichton hands, but they had gathered crucial intelligence. Could they risk it all to complete the mission, or should they cut their losses and attempt an escape? The sound of approaching Crichton forces echoed through the corridors. Time was running out. Keller looked at his battered team, then at Belos, their unlikely ally. The fate of countless worlds hung in the balance, and the next decision would determine it all. Captain James Keller's heart pounded as he made the split-second decision. Belos, take your team and crack their systems. We'll secure the bioweapon. The Ullian's mandibles clicked in acknowledgement as he led his fighters down a side corridor. Keller turned to his remaining squad. With me, we hit hard and fast. They surged forward, plasma rifles spitting blue fire as they encountered the first wave of Crichton guards. The air filled with the acrid smell of ozone and burning flesh. Private Rodriguez took a hit to the shoulder, his armor smoking, but he stayed on his feet. Keller ducked behind a bulkhead, the metal scorching hot from near misses. He glanced at his tactical display, plotting their route to the storage bay. Jenkins, Torres, cover our 6. They fought their way through winding corridors, each turn bringing fresh Cretan resistance. Keller's team moved with practiced precision, but the cost was high. Corporal Chang fell, a Crichton energy blade piercing his chest. Sergeant Wu avenged him, her shotgun blast turning the Crichton into a smoking ruin. Finally, they reached the main storage bay. Keller's blood ran cold at the sight of rows upon rows of sleek canisters, each containing enough death to wipe out an entire world. "Secure those canisters," he barked, "and watch for—" A hail of plasma fire cut him off as elite Crichton troops poured into the bay. Keller's team scrambled for cover, returning fire. The air filled with screams and the stench of burning flesh. Meanwhile, Belos and his Oleans raced through the facility's maintenance tunnels. Their chitinous fingers flew over alien control panels, bypassing security protocols with eerie efficiency. "We're in," Belos growled into his comm. "Accessing main computer core now." As they downloaded crucial data, alarms blared. Crichton technicians and guards swarmed their position. Belos snarled, his natural camouflage flickering as he fired his weapon. "Keep them back! We need more time!" Aboard his flagship, Admiral Lewis Morgan's face was a mask of tension as he monitored the unfolding chaos. A priority transmission cut through the noise. "Admiral," a Zephyrian voice crackled, "our colony on Novus Prime is under attack. Some kind of bioweapon, millions at risk." Morgan's fists clenched. He had to make a choice now. "Dispatch the 7th Fleet to Novus Prime," he ordered. "All remaining ships, prepare for close-quarters engagement. We're going in after our people." As Morgan's battle group punched through the Crichton blockade, Keller and Belos found themselves running out of time and options. "We can't hold them much longer," Keller shouted into his comm as his dwindling team fought to keep the Crichtons away from the bioweapon canisters. Belos's voice came back, tight with strain. "We have the data, but we're cut off from the extraction point." Keller made the call. "Plan Omega, overload the reactors. We'll take this whole damn place down with us if we have to." They raced against time, setting charges and initiating overload sequences. The facility groaned and shuddered around them as systems began to fail. "There!" Belos pointed to a hull breach newly formed by the structural damage. "Our way out!" They ran, Crichton forces hot on their heels. The first explosion rocked the facility, sending them stumbling. More followed in rapid succession. Keller saw starlight through the breach. They were almost there. A final, massive detonation sent them hurtling into the void of space. As they tumbled away from the disintegrating facility, Morgan's ships swooped in, tractor beams locking onto the survivors. Aboard Morgan's flagship, the exhausted strike team watched as the Crichton facility tore itself apart in a spectacular series of explosions. Morgan turned to his communications officer. "Get me a secure line to Earth Command and patch me through to the 7th Fleet. We've won a battle here today, but the war is not nearly finished." The dust had barely settled from the destruction of the Crichton facility when Admiral Lewis Morgan received the urgent transmission. His blood ran cold as he listened to the frantic report from the Zephyrian colony world. "Sir, it's chaos down here," the colonial governor's voice crackled through the comm. "The virus is spreading faster than we can contain it. We need immediate assistance." Morgan's face hardened as he issued rapid-fire orders to his fleet. Within minutes, a swarm of ships dropped out of hyperspace above the stricken planet. The Admiral watched from the bridge as his forces engaged the Crichton invaders, energy weapons lighting up the blackness of space. On the planet's surface, the situation was dire. Morgan's ground teams pushed through eerily empty streets, the air thick with the acrid smell of smoke and decay. Corporal Chen gagged as he stepped over yet another body, its skin mottled with the telltale lesions of the virus. "We've got movement!" Sergeant Reyes called out, her rifle snapping up. A group of terrified Zephyrians stumbled out of a nearby building, their eyes wide with fear. Chen moved to help them, but Reyes held him back. "Wait, we don't know if they're infected," she warned. The tense standoff was broken by the whine of approaching Crichton fighters. Chen and Reyes dove for cover as plasma bolts rained down, the Zephyrian civilians scattering in panic. Back on Earth, Dr. Eliza Kwan rubbed her bleary eyes, staring at the endless stream of data scrolling across her screen. The lab was a hive of activity. Scientists hunched over workstations as they raced to unravel the virus's secrets. "This doesn't make sense," Kwan muttered, gesturing to her colleague. "Look at this genetic sequence. It's like nothing we've ever seen before." Before her colleague could respond, an alert flashed on their screens, a priority transmission from Admiral Morgan himself. Morgan's face filled the view screen, his expression grim. "Dr. Kwan, I'm patching someone through. You're not going to like this, but right now we need all the help we can get." The screen split, revealing the scaled visage of Korax, the captured Crichton leader. Kwan's eyes widened in surprise as Korax began to speak, sharing crucial details about the bioweapon structure. As the information flowed, Kwan's fingers flew over her keyboard, inputting the new data. Slowly, agonizingly, the pieces began to fall into place. On the Zephyrian colony, the evacuation was in full swing. Captain James Keller stood at the edge of the defensive perimeter, watching as frightened colonists streamed towards the waiting shuttles. A series of explosions rocked the ground, and Keller spun to see a wave of Crichton troops advancing on their position. He raised his rifle, barking orders to his team. "Hold the line, we can't let them reach the evac zone." The air filled with plasma fire as human and Crichton forces clashed. Keller felt the heat of near misses singeing his armor as he ducked and weaved, returning fire. Suddenly, a familiar chittering sound caught his attention. Belos and his Ulian warriors surged forward, their natural camouflage shimmering as they moved. With uncanny precision, they outflanked the Crichton forces, catching them in a devastating crossfire. Keller watched in amazement as the Ulians exploited weaknesses in the Crichton formation that he hadn't even noticed. Within minutes, the enemy advance crumbled, and the path to the evacuation shuttles was clear. As the last of the survivors boarded, Keller turned to Belos. "Nice work out there. I guess we owe you one." The Ulian's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Let's just say the debt between our peoples is growing more complicated." Aboard Morgan's flagship, the Admiral paced the bridge, tension radiating from every line of his body. The quarantine zone was filled to capacity with terrified Zephyrian refugees, and the newly arrived research team was working frantically to administer the experimental treatment. A commotion from the security feed caught Morgan's attention. His eyes widened in horror as he watched Korax and a group of Crichton operatives seize control of the quarantine zone. The Crichton leader's face appeared on the main view screen, his scaled features set in a cold smile. "Admiral Morgan, I believe it's time we renegotiated the terms of my captivity." Morgan's fists clenched as he listened to Korax's demands. The lives of countless Zephyrians, not to mention his own crew, hung in the balance, and with them, perhaps the fate of humanity itself. The bridge fell silent as all eyes turned to the Admiral, waiting for his response. Morgan took a deep breath, his mind racing through the impossible choices before him. Whatever he decided, he knew the consequences would echo across the stars for years to come. Admiral Morgan's eyes narrowed as he studied the holographic display of his flagship. The quarantine zone pulsed an angry red, signaling the hostage situation within. Korax's scaled face filled the main view screen, his reptilian eyes gleaming with triumph. "Your move, Admiral," the Crichton leader hissed. "Release my officers and hand over the bioweapon data, or watch these pitiful creatures die." Morgan's lips pursed. He tapped a series of commands into his console, initiating a carefully orchestrated plan. "Very well, Korax. You'll have what you want." As Morgan's staff began the process of releasing the Crichton prisoners, Captain James Keller and his strike team moved silently through the ship's maintenance tunnels. Keller's heart pounded as he led his squad towards a hidden access point to the quarantine zone. "Team 2, in position," Sergeant Wu's voice crackled over the comm. "Ready to breach on your mark." Keller nodded to his team. "Prepare to engage. Remember, our priority is evacuating the hostages." In the command center, Morgan watched as the bioweapon data transfer began. His fingers tightened on the edge of his console as he waited for the signal. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the quarantine zone. Keller's team burst through access panels, filling the air with suppressive fire. Crichton guards fell in the initial assault, taken completely by surprise. "What is this treachery?" Korax roared, his face contorting with rage on the display. Morgan allowed himself a grim smile. "Did you really think I'd hand over that kind of power to you, Korax?" As Keller's team pushed deeper into the facility, they encountered fierce resistance. Plasma bolts sizzled past their heads, leaving scorch marks on the walls. Private Rodriguez took a hit to his leg but kept moving, dragging injured Zephyrians to safety. "This way," Dr. Kwan shouted, guiding a group of terrified researchers towards the evacuation point. "We need to protect the antiviral samples." Korax snarled and cut the transmission. He sprinted towards the data terminal, desperate to salvage something from his failed gambit. As he reached for the drive containing the bioweapon data, a figure stepped out of the shadows. "Not so fast," Admiral Morgan growled, his weathered face set with purpose. Korax lunged at the human, his claws slashing through the air. Morgan ducked under the attack, years of combat experience guiding his movements. He drove his fist into Korax's midsection, feeling scales crack under the impact. The two leaders grappled fiercely, crashing into consoles and overturning equipment. Korax's superior strength began to tell, pushing Morgan back. The Admiral's breath came in ragged gasps as he fought to keep the Crichton at bay. With a sudden burst of energy, Morgan hooked his leg behind Korax's knee and twisted. They fell to the ground, Morgan using the momentum to pin the Crichton leader. Korax thrashed wildly, but Morgan held firm, securing restraints around the alien's wrists. "It's over, Korax," Morgan panted, hauling the defeated leader to his feet. As the last of the hostages were evacuated, Morgan made his way to the medical bay. The scene that greeted him was grim. Rows of Zephyrians lay on beds, their skin mottled with the telltale lesions of the virus. Dr. Kwan moved among them, her face drawn with fatigue and worry. "How bad is it?" Morgan asked quietly. Kwan shook her head. "We've lost so many already. The antiviral treatment is helping, but it's not enough. We need something stronger." A weak voice called out from nearby, "Admiral Morgan." Morgan turned to see Ambassador Talok, the Zephyrian leader, reaching out a trembling hand. He moved to the alien's bedside, leaning in close to hear his labored words. "There's something you must know," Talok whispered, his eyes clouding with pain and regret. We were developing our own bioweapon, a deterrent against the Crichtons, but it was stolen, used against us." Morgan's blood ran cold as Talok continued, revealing the full extent of the Zephyrian's secret research. As the ambassador's life ebbed away, he made a final, desperate plea. "Use our data. Create a cure," Talok gasped. "Save those you can, and please find a way to end this conflict, regardless of the cost." With those words, Talok's eyes closed for the last time. Morgan stood in silence, the weight of this new knowledge pressing down on him. He turned to Dr. Kwan, his face etched with the gravity of the decision before him. "Doctor," he said quietly, "I need you to do something that goes against everything we stand for, but it may be our only chance to save what's left of the Zephyrian people." Kwan nodded, understanding the unspoken order. As she set to work, Morgan left the medical bay, his steps heavy with the burden of command. The Zephyrian bioweapon data could be the key to ending this crisis, but at what cost? In the days that followed, Morgan watched as the last of the Zephyrian survivors succumbed to the virus, despite the best efforts of Earth's medical teams. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, overseeing the solemn procession of ships carrying the fallen back to their homeworld for burial. With the immediate crisis past, Morgan turned his attention to the captured Korax. The Crichton leader sat across from him in the conference room, his scaled hands bound. "You've lost, Korax," Morgan said firmly. "It's time we put an end to this madness. I'm prepared to offer terms for peace, but make no mistake, this is not a negotiation. It's a chance for your people to salvage something from this catastrophe. Korax's eyes narrowed, but he remained silent as Morgan outlined the conditions for peace: the dismantling of Earth's advanced weapons programs, the ceding of strategic territories to the Crichtons. Each concession felt like a physical blow, but Morgan pressed on. As the treaty took shape, Morgan found himself reflecting on the cost of this hard-won peace. The faces of the fallen, human, Zephyrian, and yes, even Crichton, haunted his thoughts. He knew that the decisions made in the coming days would shape the future of multiple civilizations for generations to come. The negotiations dragged on for days, each point hotly contested. Morgan stood his ground where he could, but he knew that compromise was necessary to forge a lasting peace. As he affixed his signature to the final document, he felt the weight of history on his shoulders. With the treaty signed, Morgan returned to Earth to oversee the implementation of its terms. He stood on the observation deck of the orbital shipyard, watching as the pride of Earth's fleet was systematically dismantled. Each decommissioned warship felt like a piece of his own heart being torn away. As the last cruiser was reduced to scrap, Morgan turned to his aide. "Prepare my shuttle," he said quietly. "It's time we begin the work of rebuilding." Morgan boarded his ship, his mind already racing with plans for Earth's future. The path ahead would not be easy, but he was determined to forge a new destiny for humanity, one built on the hard-won lessons of this conflict. As the shuttle broke orbit, Morgan took one last look at the planet below. Earth, once dismissed as an insignificant dirt planet, had proven its worth in the crucible of interstellar war. Now, it was time to show the galaxy what humanity could achieve in peace. The stars stretched into lines as the shuttle jumped to hyperspace, carrying Admiral Morgan towards an uncertain but hopeful future.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.